What's up? It's your boy D Change coming at you with another Daily Dave. Today, I want to talk about ignorance. I guess this spawns from kind of this idea that we perceive people of the past as, I don't know, being like barbaric or extremely lacking in knowledge. And it's kind of one of those things where we think, oh, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, etc. People just didn't know so much. They're not like us now, right? But I think the truth of the matter is it's more in line with the idea that we are very similar to who we were thousands of years ago. We probably still think of the same things. We just have different tools in our toolkits now. We have smartphones, we have internet, we have the computer, we have cars. We have a lot of stuff like that. I like how I blanked out. But this comes from this interesting little tidbit I read. Now, I can't exactly verify it, obviously. But it was about soap in the medieval times. And so, yes, I, like many other people, believe that the people of medieval Europe did not bathe. Not very often, anyway. The truth of the matter, apparently, according to historical records or diaries, was that people did bathe every day, or they tried to. It was a known luxury. It was something that people wanted to do. They looked forward to it. And I'm talking about medieval peasants. They used soap, which is crazy to think about, considering, we think of soap as perhaps some sort of modern invention, but it's not. It's also very simply made, isn't it? Like, it's like you require some sort of I don't know. I'm thinking about Fight Club and the whole animal fat thing, or the liposuction dumpster diving scene. I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but I think like a certain type of fat is the basic component of a soap. But there's more to it, right? Modern soap is more of a combination of like surfactant, what is the word? Oh no. But anyway, certain chemicals that help lift dirt and grime from your skin, and part of it is by destroying the lipid bilayers of like oil and fat cells and stuff like that, right? Anyway, I'm not gonna claim to be an expert on soap, but that was an interesting little tidbit I read, and it made me really reconsider what we assume of the past. Because yeah, if these medieval peasants were taking baths whenever they could and using soap that they traded from parts of the Middle East with like the Arabs, that's pretty interesting. Why didn't we know about that before, right? And it kind of reminds me of this other article I read about how brothels were very common in medieval Europe, even though it was a time of like extreme. We're taught that it was an extremely strict religious time where all of your education and everything was given to you by the church. And so, I think it's right to assume that, or it's understandable to assume that everyone followed religious decree. But from what I read on the same site, brothels were actually put into place because they thought that men could not control themselves, and that they were such simple beasts that they needed to receive their release, otherwise they would go crazy. And it's kind of funny because the way say the sex industry is kind of painted with a broad brush today makes it seem like this is some sort of like selfish woman thing, or perhaps it's about male degeneracy or something like that. So I found that really interesting to see that these were kind of topics that people talked about many hundreds of years ago. And I would be willing to bet that, our ancestors probably had the same types of thoughts. Like the dumb stuff we think about today, they probably thought about back then too. It's just that the environments are different. Today, I'm more worried about, is my laptop going to work? Does my phone look okay? Is it doing what I want it to do? You know, even from a cosmetic standpoint, like what you wear, I'm sure back then they'd be like, oh, I wish I had like more color on my robes or something like that, you know? After all, the reason why we say stuff like the digital age is so difficult for us to kind of reconcile is because we haven't evolved past our biological instincts, right? Kind of having the fight or flight response triggered by notifications on our phones, and or you know, the amplification of negativity from social media. That's all stuff that we're not particularly biologically ready for. And a lot of social things too. I mean, social constructs of like, this is how a society should behave, this is how civilization should be, this is how we protect the weak, this is how we protect the vulnerable, this is how we should exercise social norms in order to live in a large scale city-state nation together. I think that's all very new stuff to us as a species. How far back does it go? I don't know, you know? This is when we're gonna have to look into like anthropology, and this is why we study this is why we study history, this is why we study the past, this is why we study ourselves. It just, I don't know, it just goes to show that like it's interesting. We make these assumptions out of ignorance, and it's very clear we're trying to figure stuff out, and I think that's fine. I think it's a good thing to ask questions, but it's, you know, it's a little misguided to present answers and then just assume that's, you know, that is the case. I was also kind of reminded of this of like by like it was like a Reddit thread where people were saying like, you know, as advanced South Korea is, I just still can't believe they still have the folklore of like fan death. And if you don't know what that is, it's literally the idea that if you sleep with a fan on, like you'll die. And there's not a very concrete reason as to why this little myth came about, but some people believe it's because of some sort of what do you call it? Some sort of ancient folklore that's just like, oh, okay, whatever. Another one was, you know, post-Korean War, South Korea was actually much worse off than the North, and they needed to, you know, save as much power and resources as possible. So, you know, running stuff like fans all night was like a big no-no or something like that. It's a little bit hard to believe because I don't think the power usage of a simple fan is going to be that high. But maybe it was a case of like people got sick because, I don't know if you felt this, but when air moves while I'm sleeping in my room, because I have a tower fan behind me, I've noticed a significant drying of my throat, and that could lead to, you know, development of a respiratory disease such as the common cold. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just, my thing is like, you know, people just go, oh, look at those Koreans are crazy, right? And it's like, I mean, I'm sure there's a story behind it, right? And sure, I guess you could say like, hey, get with the times. There's no science behind that. Yeah, and that's true. But you know what? They also have auto shut off fans in Korea, so that's I think that's cool. Like put a timer on your fan, therefore you won't die of death. I mean, obviously, you can sleep with a fan on, not so bad. But I think it's just interesting to realize that maybe you know, maybe we could stop at oh, maybe it's just ignorance rather than like assuming that that maybe people thought a certain way or another. I mean, obviously we want to make educated guesses, and obviously we want to find out. It's just very easy, obviously, to be like, oh, you know, these types of people do this because of this reason. Well, where's your evidence from? Oh, I've observed it. Okay, I mean, you know, you observed one person. Good job, you know. So that's just an interesting thought that I had because of I guess because, I don't know, I just ran into this information and I thought about it and I was like, yeah, if maybe everything I thought about medieval Europe, you know, is made up, or maybe it's wrong, or maybe I need to correct it, or there's a lot to learn about it, right? And that is why we have fields of specialty. That is why we have historians that specialize in certain nations or geographical locations or time periods. So it's crazy, man. I'm just kind of sad that I don't think in any of our lifetimes we'll ever be able to learn nearly as much as some of us would love to know about the world. And yeah, it's a little depressing, but I guess it makes you realize, there's certain things that there's certain things that you should consider more important than others, and maybe it does mean you should consider like your own life and the decisions you make more important than having to worry about all the troubles of the world, right? So it's just something to think about. Thanks for listening. I will see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.